think what Erin O'Toole has stated is quite serious. I think there is no room in this country for genocide deniers.
Tonight, reaction to Canada's Conservative leader's comments on residential schools.
We're vulnerable. We're in a third world living conditions here in the community.
And a First Nation with no running water gets military aid to help battle a COVID-19 outbreak. Good evening, I'm Melissa Ridge and welcome to APTN National News. Conservative Party leader Erin O'Toole is being criticized for comments he made while speaking to students at Ryerson University, downplaying residential schools. The criticisms made rounds on social media, and as Jamie Pashagumskum reports, they were not the only ones who were angry.
But when Egerton Ryerson was called in by Hector Langevin and people, it was meant to try and provide education.
These comments from November were brought to light recently in an article by Press Progress. It has many upset, including 11-year-old Maxine Beaver from Alderville First Nation in Ontario.
It was my birthday when I heard about the article.
And how did it make you feel?
It made me feel kind of angry that somebody would say something like that.
She wrote Erin O'Toole a letter. Here is what she had to say.
You and many others try to hide all the horrible things that were happening in residential schools. I hope you know how this affected hundreds of thousands of young Indigenous youth, but we are not afraid to speak up.
Meanwhile, O'Toole's political opponents have been quick to pounce. NDP MP Leah Gazan says O'Toole's comments, like those last year of Senator Lynn Bayek, distort Canada's hurtful past.
I think what Erin O'Toole has stated is quite serious. I think there is no room in this country for genocide deniers. I think that kind of thinking that you see from him or Senator Bayek, I think we should have zero tolerance. I think that is dangerous thinking.
Liberal MP Jaime Batiste thinks O'Toole should have to take cultural training and watch his public comments.
Well, he's coaching youth to disregard the truth, and instead of actually understanding what happened, to try to win a debate and deflect and say, oh, if they talk about this, then you talk about this. And that's not in accordance with the Truth and Reconciliation's calls to action.
Erin O'Toole sent this statement to APTN. I said that the residential school system was intended to try and provide education. It was not. The system was intended to remove children from the influence of their homes, families, traditions, and cultures. Maxine aims to educate O'Toole on the horrific treatment of Indigenous children in the residential school system.
The kids were taken from their families and had no choice. If their parents didn't agree, they would be arrested and they would take the children in cattle trucks. Most of the children were traumatized by what residential schools did to them. And they did not get an education. They were taught how to not be themselves and not to be proud of their culture. That was the education taught in residential schools.
Maxine says Mr. O'Toole can contact her if he needs any more educating. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Another Manitoba First Nation is fighting a COVID-19 outbreak. Red Sucker Lake First Nation has brought in the military to help. Daryl Stranger has more.
Red Sucker Lake First Nation, located in northern Manitoba near the Ontario border, declared a state of emergency and a full lockdown on December 11th due to COVID-19. Now, Chief Samuel Knott and his family are one of many members in the community to test positive for the virus. The community does not have running water, and many households actually use pail water for their water. This is something that Chief Knott feared would play a factor if COVID-19 were to enter the community.
We're vulnerable. We're in a third world living conditions here in the community, and I have often addressed that to the department many times before. And I did predict this. If we were to get hit with this COVID, we won't be able to contain or to handle the outbreak. And sure enough, it's upon us.
Chief Knott added that the number of positive cases in the community is officially at 57 as of today, but he did say the number is actually probably much higher due to testing limits within the community. Now, a recon team from the military was sent in over the weekend to assess the situation. NDP MP Nikki Ashton says the situation in Red Sucker Lake is much the same as it was in Shamattawa.
This is the moment where we need to see the federal government pull out all the stops for Red Sucker Lake, ensure that they are there for every single community dealing with the COVID crisis, and recognizing that for remote communities it is particularly challenging. And let's see everything be done to save lives in this community. That's what this is all about. Lives are on the line. We need to see the federal government step up and do everything it can to save lives now.
And speaking of Shamattawa, the community has over 350 cases of COVID-19, and over half of those are in the community itself. Now, more military arrived in Shamattawa over the weekend, and the number of military personnel sits at just below 60. Now, Chief Eric Redhead said Monday, once a vaccine is approved and arrives in the community, he will be getting it, but not before those most vulnerable.
When we do get the vaccine, then I'm going to take it. I'm going to encourage everyone to take it. It is a choice, but I choose to protect my family. I choose to protect my friends, and I choose to protect the community by getting vaccinated.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, Daryl. And to Nunavut now, where there are still active COVID-19 cases, but the situation's getting better. We're joined by our Nunavut reporter, Kent Driscoll from Iqaluit. Kent, it's been just over a month since Nunavut reported their first positive case of the COVID-19 virus. What's the situation like today?
Well, the good news, Melissa, is that Nunavut's COVID-19 outbreak is down to one community. Now, that's the community of Arviat. It's just north of Churchill, Manitoba, if you want to straighten out where it is in your head. Now, all the cases in Whale Cove, Rankin Inlet, and Santa Kilowak, they've all recovered. As of today, there are 44 active cases of COVID-19 in Nunavut, all in Arviat, and there have been 258 cases total. That means 214 people in Nunavut have recovered from COVID-19.
Why is Arviat the one place with remaining cases? Did something different happen there?
Well, I asked our Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Michael Patterson, about that earlier this week, specifically about what's different in Arviat. And you got to remember, Arviat has an overcrowding problem. It's not uncommon to see 3 generations living in one roof, but that's pretty common throughout the territory as well. Now, the health department's considering the idea that there may have been a super spreader. Now, in some rare cases, someone who has COVID-19 can be asymptomatic and spread at a much higher rate than people ordinarily do when they have the virus. So they're starting to consider that there was a lot of spread before the first case was actually detected, possibly by a super spreader. Now, you also have to wonder how effective has the actual lockdown in Arviat been. Just last week, our health minister, Lauren Kusagak, he was pleading with residents there to follow the conditions that have been in place. To quote him, quote, "If you would listen for 2 weeks, this could all go away. This is so preventable. Just listen." And he added, "Now you know who you are. If you've been told that you've tested positive, please stop people in your house from visiting." And that's a really direct message from our health minister.
I love that. You know who you are. How are Nunavummiut holding up? Arviat's still obviously in a serious lockdown, but some of the conditions have been loosened in the territory.
Yeah, the restrictions are starting to show on us, to be honest, Melissa. Like in Arviat, for example, one local store decided they wanted to do an outdoor scavenger hunt, sort of as a fun thing for the customers. And residents there were not very happy with the idea of people even gathering together outside during the pandemic. And also in Arviat, the people I've been talking to there, there's a growing call for enforcement. There's been no fines levied against people for breaking regulations so far, and it's getting really frustrating for the people in Arviat who are following the conditions to see others not following the conditions, and they're calling for fines to be levied. Now, and then you go to Cambridge Bay. This is a wild one. In Cambridge Bay this week, the 2 postmasters for the whole community quit basically in the middle of a shift.
Yeah.
And they put up a sign on their way out. They put a sign in the window that said, and I'm quoting, "I quit. Good luck getting your parcels now." There's been a lot of pressure on Canada Post employees throughout this entire pandemic. A spokesperson from the Postmasters and Assistants Association says that aggression from customers towards post office employees has gone up 98% under COVID. And one of the things, aside from people complaining about their mail, there was a limit of 3 people in that post office, and they were being forced to enforce that, and masks being worn were mandatory in the post office. And that was a lot of pressure on the postmasters. So, yeah, the cracks are showing a little.
There's news this week that the Moderna vaccine is going to be headed to the territories. Why did they pick that vaccine, and what's the rollout going to look like?
Well, the Pfizer vaccine needs some serious freezing. It's cold in Nunavut, but it's not minus 70 cold all the time. Now, the Moderna one is deemed the easier to handle of the two, and it's easier to execute in Nunavut's 25 different communities. It travels better than Pfizer. So it's looking now like we could see our first vaccinations before the end of this year. Nunavut's prioritizing healthcare workers and nursing home residents as the first people to get the vaccine, and they say they're going to have enough doses for 75% of the adult population. Now, that's a bit of a catch there because half of Nunavut's population is age 25 or under. So even if we get that 75% vaccination among adults, that's still a lot of unvaccinated people out there. So the health department anticipates that they'll be keeping our 2-week mandatory quarantine before entering Nunavut intact for quite some time to come, Melissa.
Thanks for all of this, Kent. Always a pleasure talking to you. Stay healthy.
Quyanamik, Melissa, always a pleasure.
We need to take a break, but still ahead, why some are calling on nations to come up with alternatives to the colonial court system for parents sorting out custody issues.
I can handle a bad breakup, but what happened to me with the RCMP within the courts, both provincial and Supreme Court, that is not normal.
Welcome back to Labrador now, where the Nunavut government is raising concerns over rising methyl mercury downstream from a hydroelectric dam, and the energy company's inaccurate predictions. Angel Moore reports.
It's been 1 year since the reservoir at Muskrat Falls filled to capacity, and the methyl mercury levels downstream are rising. According to Nalcor Energy, the government-owned corporation, the levels are within safe limits, but they declined to be interviewed. Minister Greg Flowers of the Nunavut government does not trust Nalcor's predictions.
The vegetation and the soil that after the flooding, the concentration of methyl mercury is a lot higher than Nalcor is predicting.
The controversial hydroelectric dam on Lower Churchill River was met with backlash from community members. They feared the ecosystem was at risk from methyl mercury forming in the reservoir. Methyl mercury is created when organic matter is flooded. It is also poisonous to wildlife. And now, with levels rising, the Nunavut government is proposing a joint monitoring program with the provincial government.
I don't think we, as Indigenous people, can trust what Nalcor says, and so that's why we certainly like to have the province on board and ourselves to monitor.
Flower says traditional foods harvested are safe for human consumption, for now, and a trusted monitoring system will predict the impacts for coming generations. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Chibuktuk, Halifax.
One of the chiefs responsible for implementing an investigative review of sexual orientation and gender-based discrimination within the Assembly of First Nations is speaking out about what caused her to push for an examination of its current regulations. Chief Doris Bill says for years she heard complaints of discriminatory remarks about women in the AFN, like derogatory comments about their age and their appearance, and says the Me Too movement also influenced her decision.
It's been a male-dominated environment for a long, long time. Perhaps some of them don't see it. You know, perhaps some of them just ignore it. Perhaps they don't want to see it. However, we came together for a common purpose, and that purpose is to have a work environment that is free of sexual orientation and gender-based discrimination.
Last week, the Assembly passed a resolution that would see 3 independent investigators take on the review. A final report will be expected within 9 months and would include recommendations for change. Well, it's no secret that Indigenous people don't fare well in the court system, and we see that's also the case in family court when couples are sorting out child custody. That was the topic of discussion on today's In Focus. Simcoe mother shared some of the battles that she's had in family court that escalated to the point a judge sided with a non-Indigenous father, banning the mom from taking her daughter to their traditional territory. Take a look.
You know, with my daughters and I, we had to leave the relationship because of the abuse that was involved. And I had reached out to go to the North Van RCMP in particular and get a peace bond so that things weren't so complicated as getting a protection order. I had read that that was sort of a better way to do it. But they actually didn't even believe me, and even though I had to go in for an interview, etc. And then I actually did file a complaint, a human rights complaint, and then which was refused, and they said that I had to go through the civilian complaints, believe it's Civilian Complaints Commission. I don't know, it's a long acronym, but and then they just kept asking question after question for months, to the point that at this point I'm just frustrated because it's gone nowhere, because that's why I didn't want to file with the civilian review to begin with, because this is what I heard, that it's almost pointless. That's why I had originally filed with the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
Yeah.
So that's been ongoing. I actually just heard recently that the Canadian Human Rights Commission is going to, they've just assigned a mediator. So this is stemming from events from 2018, and it's now 2 years later, and now finally throughout. So I mean, I guess there's a little bit of progress, but to me, I have considered actually withdrawing that, because it's exhausting as a parent. I'm a single parent to 3 children. I have a career. You know, I do a lot of volunteer work in the community, and I just actually help advocate. So people call me, people Facebook me, they need advice, and that's, I think, a huge thing that I've taken out of this. As an Indigenous person, we're just left alone.
We have to take another break, but when we come back, Donna Marrow.
I've always been the kind of guy that always figures out how to make the most. You know, if you get a lemon, make some good lemonade. And, you know, I really felt like the fall has kind of been a nonstop season for me of different virtual opportunities.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Thanks to Christine King of Wamidji, Quebec for today's photo of the day. Pictured are her son Maverick and Anamiki the pit bull out for a walk in a veritable winter wonderland. Be sure to send your photos to share@aptn.ca. Maybe your photo can be our next photo of the day. Let's take a look now at tomorrow's weather forecast. Heading to the east coast, we got -8 and snow for Charlottetown, -7 and snow for Fredericton and Halifax. -12 and sunshine for Nain, Kuujjuaq -18 and snow. Gaspé -7 and snow. Quebec City sunshine -10. Capital of Ottawa -9 and sunny. Same with North Bay. -5 and snow for Sioux Lookout. Big Trout Lake -4 and snow. -17 and snow for Thompson. -12 for God's Lake and Norway House. Snow there. Sunshine and -4 for Winnipeg. Mix of sun and cloud. -3 for Dauphin. 0 and snow for Estevan and Regina. -3 and snow for Saskatoon. -16 and snow for Buffalo Narrows, -28 and snow for Stony Rapids. -25 for High Level and Fort Chip, snow there. -6 and snow for Edmonton, 5 and sunshine for Lethbridge. 6 and some cloud for Kamloops, 8 and sunshine for Campbell River. -2 and snow for Prince George, -12 and snow for Dease Lake. Whitehorse, -15 and snow. Dawson City, some mix of sun and cloud, -30. Wauhati, -33 and snow. Sunshine for Norman Wells, -26. Polytech, -25 and snow. Tuktoyaktuk, -27 and snow. Chesterfield, -31 and sunny skies. New Yacht, -27 and clear. Tallyoak, -37, clear skies. Joe Haven, -34 and clear. Iqaluit, -22 and sunshine. Well, 2020 has been a little different. Most live events were shut down due to the pandemic, including in APTN's Indigenous Day Live back in June. But instead, APTN is putting on the Indigenous Day Live Winter Solstice, 5 days of performances from artists like Alanis Morissette, Jeremy Dutcher, and Donna Merrow, who Dennis Ward spoke with about the virtual event.
Dawn, thanks for being with us. Your performances will be featured on 3 of the days during this week-long event for the Winter Solstice. What can you tell us about these performances and how you got involved?
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of my most favorite bands I've ever had the privilege of putting together. Some great Canadian talent here that I have around me, we're performing some of the new material that I just put out this year. So we were supposed to be playing Aboriginal Day Live in June, but for obvious reasons that didn't happen. So we've now sort of pivoted, is the word that we've been using a lot lately, to doing this Winter Solstice concert. And it's, again, I'm just so glad that we were still able to do something and have a gig to play. And it came together, I think, really well.
Don, you'd typically be hosting your own annual special right around now, A Merry Little Christmas, but that too won't be happening because of the pandemic, at least in its regular format. But I understand you're taking it online this year. Yeah, again, another pivot is just, for me, the Christmas season, as anybody knows me, knows that Christmas season and I go hand in hand. And I just felt like if there was ever a time when people needed to be inspired and have good, heartwarming Christmas pumping in their homes, now is it. And I feel like, especially now here in Winnipeg, we're in this, code red lockdown. And I just feel like more than ever, people need to feel encouraged and inspired and connected. And I hope that what we can do with this Christmas show, which is happening December 19th, we're still going to, do it here at the Burton Cummings Theatre in Winnipeg. People can tune in and watch from the comfort of their homes. You can go to donnamerrow.ca if you want to grab a ticket. And yeah, it's different, but I think hopefully it'll still be really cozy and warm and give you all the good feels. Looking forward to grabbing my ticket. Don, aside from A Merry Little Christmas and having to take that online, what has the impact been for yourself during this pandemic in your career? Yeah, I mean, it's been strange. I will say this, when it first happened, this is a weird thing to say, and I wish obviously this pandemic had never happened, but in some ways, I've been going pretty hard for well over a decade, and this sort of was a forced reprieve, and being able to sort of just unplug and be home with the family. So that was kind of a welcome break. Then the summer hit, and all those gigs went away, and that was a bit of a hit. However, once September came, I've always been the kind of guy that always figures out how to make the most. If you get a lemon, make some good lemonade. And I really felt like the fall has kind of been a nonstop season for me of different virtual opportunities, and I'm looking so forward to getting back to playing for a live crowd one of these days soon. But until then, I think I'm enjoying playing with the band I've got around me, and it hasn't been easy, but I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, more so these days than ever. So I believe in that. Well, Don, I'm glad that A Merry Little Christmas will go on, and looking forward to your Solstice shows. Appreciate you speaking with us about them. My pleasure, man. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you.
You can watch the APTN Indigenous Day Live Winter Solstice on APTN starting on Monday, December 21st. There will be a new show each day all week, and you can catch an encore presentation of our face-to-face episode with Donna Merrow on December 22nd, including some great performances of Dawn's Christmas classics. We're all out of time for your midweek news. Thanks for joining us. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.